All right, let's jump right into this explainer. Today, we're deconstructing a seriously chilling piece of psychological horror, the short story Attendance at the Aurelia Theater. We are going to look at exactly how a supernatural trap is built from the ground up. If you've ever wondered how monsters manage to hunt in plain sight and basically weaponize our own human nature against us, well, you are in the exact right place.
So the whole nightmare kicks off with this cheap, smudged flyer that just kind of appears overnight. It says one night only, midnight, bring someone you love. These things are slipped under doors, tucked under windshield wipers, and it works. It lures 30 people to a velvet-seated theater that, get this, had actually been shuttered for 11 years. It is literally the perfect bait. It promises this exclusive event, but it has that sinister little hook, demanding you bring someone close to your heart.
Which forces a pretty uncomfortable question. Would you go? I mean, we really have to ask ourselves how nostalgia and just pure curiosity can completely overpower our basic survival instincts when we're handed an invitation that ominous. The address is familiar, sure. The memories of watching matinees there as a kid are warm and fuzzy, but that combination is dangerously blinding to the logical part of your brain that should absolutely be screaming, "Stay away."
Which brings us to phase one of the entity's plan, the bait, or using nostalgia as a trap.
The trap essentially works by masking the deeply decayed reality of the theater with this warm, comforting, nostalgic illusion. In reality, the place has been abandoned for over a decade. We're talking shattered bulbs, a gross, cobwebbed popcorn popper sitting in the dark. But the illusion it feeds the victims? A blazing white marquee, which actually spells absolutely nothing when you really look at it, the perfectly manufactured smell of fresh popcorn, and completely restored red velvet seats. It is a facade meticulously designed to make you lower your guard.
And, who actually falls for this? Well, the entity specifically preys on vulnerable human emotions, right? It targets people harboring deep grief. Take our protagonist, Mara. She is absolutely desperate to see her brother Caleb genuinely smile again. They just buried their mother in the spring. The trap hones right in on that desperate desire to heal her brother, making sure she just ignores the giant red flag staring her right in the face. To her, seeing him smile for even a second is worth whatever weirdness comes next.
But then we get the first major crack in that comfortable illusion, right in the lobby. The usher taking their tickets is just deeply unsettling. His face seems wrong, like a photograph of a photograph. He's this uncanny 16-year-old boy who doesn't say a single word. He just tears the tickets and points toward the doors. The warm nostalgia is definitely starting to slip here, giving us a peek at the lifeless predator hiding right there under the usher's little vest.
Moving into the theater itself, we hit phase two, the snare. This is where the horrifying premiere actually starts. The true terror here really lies in how the footage they're forced to watch escalates. At first, it's recognizable domestic comfort, just a grainy, static morning shot of Mara's own front porch. Then it shifts to these totally mundane afternoon scenes of the neighbors' houses. But then it changes. It turns into this invasive, predatory surveillance. The camera physically drifts up the stairs and right into Mrs. Okoffer's bedroom at night while she's sleeping. And it culminates in a terrifying time jump to tomorrow, where the camera is actively hunting Caleb in his room. It goes from slightly unsettling to actively lethal in a matter of minutes. So why don't they just get up and leave? Because that's when the physical trap springs shut. The audience becomes entirely paralyzed in those nice restored velvet seats. Mrs. Okafor starts yelling for them to turn it off, but nobody can move a muscle. Their eyes are supernaturally forced to stay locked right onto the screen. As panic really starts setting in for Mrs. Okafor and old Walt, he's the local hardware store owner, Mara realizes they are physically trapped. And worse, she knows without even having to turn around that the exit doors at the back of the theater have simply ceased to exist. They've been swallowed whole by the dark. And the nature of the footage itself starts changing too. The text says, the frame shook with something like breathing. The cinematography literally morphs from a passive observer into an active, breathing predator. It's actively hunting old Walt in the dark aisles of his hardware store on the screen, getting way too close. It completely shatters that safe barrier between a harmless movie and a live feed from a hungry monster.
This brings us to the climax, Phase 3, the ultimatum, and a truly impossible choice.
Let's just clinically break down the rules of this curse for a second. Step 1, lure the town in with nostalgia and the promise of a night out with loved ones. Step 2, seal the doors and paralyze the audience in pure terror. Step 3. Demand one loved one as a sacrifice to let the rest of the group go free. It's executed flawlessly. Because right then, that uncanny usher with the wrong face appears at the end of Mara's row in the pitch dark, just holding out a blank slip of paper.
And what does he actually say? It only takes one, someone you love. The theater needs one to let the rest of you go home. These are the very first words this usher speaks all night. He drops this horrifying ultimatum that forces these completely paralyzed victims to weigh their own self-preservation against the exact same love that brought them into the theater in the first place.
It creates this absolutely heartbreaking juxtaposition. On one side, you have Caleb. He's smiling, totally oblivious to the deadly threat on the screen, feeling free of his grief for just a brief moment. But on the other side, Mara is entirely horrified. She's sitting there holding this blank slip of paper, looking at the screen as the camera creeps closer and closer to Caleb's bed, fully understanding the terrible, terrible cost required to just walk out of that room alive.
It all crashes down on Mara in one horrific realization. The Aurelia hadn't reopened to show a movie. It had reopened to take attendance. It is just a massive gut punch. She finally understands the true, sinister purpose of the entire setup. They aren't an audience at all. They're an inventory.
Let's look at the aftermath, Phase 4, how this dark cycle continues. You see, this predatory cycle is agonizingly patient. 11 years ago, the theater mysteriously shuttered. Then, in October, Mara attends the last showing and makes her impossible choice. And then, a whole year later, those exact same smudged black ink flyers are back on the car windshields and telephone poles around town. It proves that this entire predatory cycle relies completely on a constant, steady stream of human desperation and grief to keep itself running.
And how exactly does the cycle sustain itself? Well, Mara's final, terrifying thought gives us the answer. She still had a few people left. When she finds a new flyer tucked under her wiper blade in the cold morning light, she doesn't throw it away, she puts it in her pocket. It's a really dark final line. It reveals how the trauma and that impossible choice she had to make have entirely corrupted her own morality. She is actually willing to play the game again.
So, when you really think about the true cost of survival and the cold mechanics of a supernatural trap like this, who would you bring? What would you do if you woke up and found that smudged, cheap paper flyer stuck to your windshield tomorrow morning? Think about it. Thanks for joining me for this explainer. It's been a blast deconstructing the Aurelia Theater with you. Catch you next time.